Hey, it's Ron McLean. Welcome to Hockey Talk on the Rock.
With Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
All right, here we are back doing Hockey Talk on the Rock, episode number 69.
Ooh,
very nice.
Very nice, yeah.
And we got some Canucks stuff to talk about, and I want to touch on the fallout from the trade deadline, i.e. the Evgeny Dadonov saga.
Yeah.
But let's talk Canucks.
Yeah, so again, Canucks have been a very up and down team of late. Like, I think we last talked at the end of that homestand, and we're kind of thinking, okay, things are probably done for this team, and, you know, they didn't play well in general on that homestand. And then they kick off their road trip and they beat Colorado and they take Minnesota to overtime and they look like a really good hockey team and things seem to be going well for them. Again, the only downside is that it seems like, at least right now in the West, to me it almost feels like no one really wants that last wild card spot or like the third Pacific spot even, and I mean, we can touch on that with the rest of the league stuff, but, you know, Winnipeg, for example, they looked like they were playing really well, and then they lost to, is it Chicago that they lost to? Or was Montreal? I don't know, they lost to, like, a bottom of the league team that you'd think, with the games meaning so much for them, they'd win that game, they'd show up for it. And, I mean, you can use basically any team in this battle right now and say the same thing about them. I mean, the Canucks with like Detroit and Buffalo, like Vegas numerous times in the last couple weeks, Dallas. So it's a very interesting spot for them because they can still do it. They can still make it. But they're going to have to string some wins together here pretty soon. But I did take a peek at their schedule, and it seems like they're gonna get a couple weaker teams in the next couple weeks. So, and obviously the big thing with the Canucks is that they do play, like they play Dallas again and they play Vegas 3 times. So those games obviously are like the 4-point games, and they're really gonna matter for the team. Yeah, for sure. They played one of their better games of the entire season against Colorado. And just move the cat here. And then came out and played a game against Minnesota where it looked like Minnesota was trying to just impose their size and weight. And Vancouver did an admirable job of sticking up to them. I think Minnesota's going to be a deadly team to play a 7-game series against. I'm super excited in general with that like Central Division because I feel like if it is Minnesota-Nashville in the first round, that series is going to be like rough. Or even St. Louis too. Yeah. So one of those two, if they match up against Minnesota, I think those will be fun kind of underrated series to watch. But I agree. I think Minnesota is built for the playoffs this year for sure, and getting Fleury was a nice, security blanket for them. But yeah, Talbot's played pretty good since they got him. It's true. Yeah. Again. And going back to the Colorado game quickly, props to Halak for coming in there and playing, probably his best game of the year. He was excellent. Yeah. And then you can't really fault him for the St. Louis game. I thought he was game. He got a couple that early goal was a bad bounce. Yeah. And then he was kind of hung out to dry on the second one. So it was just one of those games where, he's coming into form at a good time because of, like we've talked about, how many back-to-backs there are. Yeah, and I mean also like for two other reasons, right? Like Demko at this stage is looking like he needs a break. He's had like again that Dallas game in that third period specifically, like he was unreal. That Scorpion save was just ridiculous, but the whole period itself was really Demko putting on a show. But in order for him to perform his best, he does have to be able to have like those nights off, even again if it's not the back-to-backs. But secondly, for Halak himself, right, like if he wants to play next year, he's got to show that he's still got it. And I'm not saying he's playing on the Canucks next year. I'm just saying like playing for an NHL job next year. Yeah. And I kind of think that clicked in his brain after the trade deadline. And so you might see his better performances from here on out, kind of thing. Hopefully. Because of that, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, not just the fatigue of Thatcher Demko, you can kind of see it on the road trip, the fatigue. Like, best game against Colorado, heavy game against Minnesota where they held their own.
Yeah.
Dallas, I think they kind of got lucky that one because they certainly didn't dominate that game. The score was 4-1, but they got 2 at the end.
Yeah.
And then the St. Louis game kind of went some old habits.
Yeah. And I will give them props also in the Dallas game because I think Dallas did try to do the Minnesota thing to Vancouver. Like, they did try to impose their size and play that heavy style game because they saw that Minnesota got some success doing that. And I think Vancouver did a good job hanging in there and getting the win again. So I agree. I think they're tired out. They're a tired team, and the last couple games I've really noticed with both opponents. the Dallas game, I thought for the first 2 periods it was a pretty boring game, and that both sides looked pretty tired. And same with St. Louis. I thought that if St. Louis got the bounces kind of early and they got that 2-0 lead, and it didn't feel like Vancouver ever really got back into it after that. Yeah. But neither team looked that great to me. It was kind of like,
And I wonder how much having this being the first full season in 3 years now is having an effect too, right?
Yeah, and all the short summers too. I mean, short summers because they did have the one really big break with COVID, but yeah, it might be starting to catch up with them. But yeah, we'll see. Again, they play Minnesota. St. Louis again tomorrow night. So we'll see how the rematch goes. Hopefully there's a bit more feeling in it. Yeah.
And like you said, probably the biggest games of the year from here on out based on standings is Vegas.
Yep.
And so
Saturday night.
Segue into Vegas. And, last time we got together, we talked about the trade deadline. We did some winners and losers.
Yeah.
We talked about Anaheim being a winner. And they picked up Dadonov in a second. And then the follow-up from that, as most hockey lovers know by now, was it got voided because Ottawa didn't send the paperwork in the trade with Dadonov to Vegas with 10-team no trade, and Anaheim was on it. And Vegas wasn't going to honor it because they didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So now there was this awkward situation where a player knows that a team has just paid a pretty good price
to get
rid of you. And then he comes back and he's been like, if not their top scorer, one of them, because he's been on fire.
Well, honestly, that's why I was surprised about them trading him at the point when they did as well, because he'd been playing pretty well, and they didn't really have anyone else who was chipping in offensively besides like Eichel. But he's had a decent enough season in Vegas, and again, part of it is because a lot of the players have been hurt, but it was absolutely hilarious that he's like plotting those big goals now, like that game against Chicago. Like, of course it was gonna be him, but I will say, like, with Vegas, like, Cap Friendly had his no trade on it. Like, how did they not know?
Right.
And I think it's weird for 2 reasons, because it passed the checks that it's meant to go through, like, when the NHL like approves the trade.
Yeah, through Central Registry.
Yeah, so they okayed it as well, and that is also kind of alarming. Like, I heard that like NHL like 22 or whatever, they had it registered as it on his list. So like, how is it that just like Vegas and the Central Registry are the ones that don't know? I think that that's very interesting. It did sound like I was listening to Friedman talk a bit about it, like maybe Vegas would explore still trading Dadonov, and he wouldn't be able to play for the rest of the season, right? But they could trade him to like Arizona, for example, and I'm guessing Arizona would want a lot now because they know again that you're trying to give up a second to get rid of this guy, and now
he won't be able to play.
Yeah, so I don't think they do it anymore, partially because of how he's played post-trade deadline. But, I mean, what an awkward situation for the player. But also, like, for the 2 teams that are involved, could you pick, like, 2 more perfect teams to have this be messed up? Like, Ottawa and Vegas? I don't know. It was pretty funny. But
and I heard also Friedman talking about how the league kind of looked into like punishing Ottawa for their like neglect in sending it.
Yeah.
And they're not going to, but he suggested that Vegas down the road here might file a grievance against Ottawa.
Okay. Yeah.
Just as for the pain it caused them, or the pain in the ass it caused them, I guess. But yeah, kind of a very interesting and unique situation that cropped up there.
Yeah, for sure. I've never seen anything like that one before. So
no,
it was something for sure.
Other than that, do we have? I'm gonna give a quick shout out to Drew. He's got like 4 points in a couple games with Florida since he got there. So
Pretty
props
crazy,
to him.
yeah.
Excited to watch Florida go to the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think that there is that much left. I mean, there was the GM meetings where they floated around the idea of getting rid of the LTIR loophole, but I don't like obviously any sort of change to that is gonna involve the players, and I don't see that happening now. And I also think I don't know, the players don't get paid in the playoffs, right? So I don't know, like. It's a joke. I have more of a problem personally with them being able to trade like Ryan Kessler's contract, who's never going to play again, than I do with the actual LTIR part of it. Like, again, this year I feel like we're maybe seeing the risk of LTIR specifically with Vegas, because they would be so much over the cap if everyone was healthy, but you still need to get to the playoffs. Yeah. So I don't know, like, not every team is going to be able to put their Kucherovs on LTIR and still have, like, a very good team to make it to the playoffs, and it's not fair, but sports aren't fair. I don't know. Yeah,
well, it's one of those things that, like, it's been going on for a decade, right? Yeah. And they know it, but they said that it was kind of like the t-shirts that came out, the 18 mil over the cap, that would kind of, like, put a real bad look on them. That made this kind of overreaction, but I don't think they'll do anything about it.
They won't do anything about it. And again, if you're a GM that's complaining about it, like, you probably just aren't smart enough to know how to use it to your advantage, or you work in a small market that won't pay. So it's one of the two. But
I heard a good example today, just to follow up a little bit on that, is like, I guess Ken Holland was one of the people who suggested, like, you know, have as many on your roster as you want in the playoffs, but like your 20-man guys that go on the ice or whatever, they got to be under. But it's like, you know, the first thing that came back was like, well, okay, but if, let's say, McDavid got hurt into the playoffs and you want to use that $12.5 million of his to get players to get you to the playoffs,
exactly.
When he comes back, then you're going to be punished by not playing players that you acquired to get you there.
I mean, I would be okay with something like, if you have a player on LTIR for a certain amount of time, let's say 6 months, then, like, if he wants to play that first playoff game or something, like, you can't. Like, it's something like that. Right. Where it's like, okay, like, because the thing with Kucherov last year, too, right, was that why people were so mad was because he was probably ready to come back and play before the playoffs, and they just were like, no, we'll sit you out. So if it's something like that, and again, I don't know how you do it, except maybe with time and the specific injury, and just say, like, you know, you're going to have to miss a week or something in the playoffs if you're out this long, and maybe something like that, but
I'm sure there's a simple way that they've talked about, and it's too easy almost, where they could just say, playoffs 10% over, or something, because then that gives you an $8 million worth of relief for picking up a hurt player, a couple hurt players or something, but smarter people than me can figure that out.
I thought it was interesting that they were even talking about it. And then the other news, I guess, was that Eugene Melnyk passed away, which is unfortunate for his family, obviously, but it's interesting for the league and for Ottawa because, I mean, Melnyk did not have a good reputation as an owner. But he did keep the Sens in Ottawa in a time when it was kind of unclear if they were going to stay. And so one thing that I'm interested in with Ottawa is if eventually down the road we're going to see them move to Quebec City.
Yeah, it feels like either that could happen or a new ownership gets, you know, the kids sell it. Yeah. And new ownership comes in and they make the new arena happen. Yeah. You know, which is kind of like the big stumbling block.
Yeah, so anyway, it'll be something to watch in the next couple of, years here, but
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, well, other than that, we'll be back next time with episode number 70. This is Laura, I'm Keith, and this is another episode of Hockey Talk on the Rock.
Woo!